Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for the May 8th, 2023 work session of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Planning Commission. This meeting is officially called to order. We will begin with introductions, and I'm going to start with commissioners from my left, please.
RJ Harvey.
Jennifer Gaston.
Aaron Shaw.
Welcome, Aaron. Philip Gusman, Vice Chair.
Andrew Blumenthal, Planning Commission.
Rebecca Wilden, Planning Commission.
Will Russell, Planning Commission.
Douglas Welton.
Shauna Neely, Planning Commission.
Terry Lansdale.
Rick Winiker.
Clayton Seeley, Planning Commission.
Melissa Gaston, Planning Commission. My name is Kiba Samuel, and I have the privilege of serving as chair of the Planning Commission. Again, welcome and thank you. This meeting, this work session is being held at the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Government Center at 600 East 4th Street, and we are in room 267. For viewing by public and media, today's meeting is being streamed live on the Planning, Design, and Development's YouTube page. If we have all had an opportunity to review the, I'm sorry, thank you. Our lovely staff members always accompany us during these meetings, and I'd like to take an opportunity for them to introduce themselves, starting from my left.
Candace Rory, Planning Staff.
Allison Craig, Planning Director.
David Zarr with Charlotte Water.
Happy Cornett, Community Planning.
Thank you, everybody. Now, if we have had an opportunity to review our agenda packet, I will accept a motion to approve and or edit minutes from our April 2023 work session. I think we have a excited Planning Commission member ready to move.
Very excited. Motion to approve. Wilden.
Second, Blumenthal.
Motion by Wilden, second by Blumenthal. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimous. Thank you. Over the past couple of months, we have been revisiting different iterations of this particular work program item of the Planning Commission's rezoning considerations has been the name that we have been operating under. In the last, well, let's just say this, since our last Planning Commission meeting, we had asked that staff meet actually a few times, and I'm trying to gather my words so I can reflect this accurately. We met with planning staff, including UDO team members, comp team members, comp plan team members, and our planning director regarding the document, and including counsel to the commission, Ms. Cherie Hagler Gray. And in receiving feedback from those bodies, we felt it best for all parties involved that the document receive some assistance from staff is probably the best way that I can put it, in that it was recommended that the items in the rezoning considerations list be tied to a specific section of the UDO. Laura Harmon and Team UDO offered to visit the document and do that work behind the scenes for us. We were hoping to present the updated, edited document today for consideration and adoption. However, in order to do that today, adopt or review and adopt, we would have had to deliver that document to the Planning Commission in advance for you guys to really study, review, etc. It took staff a little bit longer. Needless to say, they do other things outside of supporting the Planning Commission, and they've been quite busy, as we all know. They have made great progress on the document, but they need a little bit more time to tie up some loose ends. If you don't mind, Ms. Harmon, can you please accompany us here at the dais? Candace, can we? Laura, we met just last week on Wednesday, I think, Thursday. Thank you. So this is very fresh, guys. And thank you for squeezing that meeting in shortly after delivering that document. So the document was delivered back to us on Wednesday evening. I took a moment to review it and had some concerns and asked to meet with the folks who had made edits to the document. It has been reformatted from the original or from the iteration in which we delivered to staff. And I wanted staff to explain or to help lead discussion around the current shape of the document and what is left to do in terms of delivering it back to full commission for consideration. I'm going to pause there and let Laura kind of jump in. And I don't know, Laura, I don't know if it would be helpful for you to have the document on screen. I have not prepped Candace for that, though.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, maybe because multiple people went in there and worked on it. I think we are pretty much done with what we need to put in for the UDO, but I didn't know if kind of just to clarify, our next step, we're going to go back and format it so that it looks like it originally did, is our intent. And I'm looking towards these guys to make sure that I'm not misspeaking our intent.
How much would it take to get the document up on the screen?
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's pretty messy. So it wasn't really intended to be shareable just yet. But I mean, I think what we did was really try to, because one of the recommendations from the attorney was to, as we're talking with petitioners, making sure we're tying back to adopted policy and adopted ordinances. And so what we went through is attached it to each of the questions to either a comp plan policy if one existed and or something in the UDO that actually requires that and specifying where that was. And so it was kind of a brain dump of all of those sorts of things. And so when Kibo said, let's meet, we did, and we had a great conversation, and I think we have some clear direction as to what we should do next.
I think the next, in terms of next steps, what we've decided to do is to attempt, and when I say attempt, it gets harder the more people you involve. But I think it is of high value and almost paramount at this point that we not continue to have one-off meetings. One-off meetings meaning I might be called into a meeting with staff about the document, or I may call a meeting with subcommittee about the document, or we will request meeting with counsel to the commission regarding the document. I think all the parties need to be in one room. We come together in terms of maybe the format of that meeting is more of a work session-ish, so that everybody has an opportunity to weigh in and we can press forward during that meeting, coming up with a way where all three parties are satisfied. Staff has concerns about the document that I have already discussed with subcommittee members, but basically they want to support our work, but they have to be able to do it from a policy perspective. And they would like to have a little bit increased comfort in being able to defend the use of the document in their work. And in order for them to do that, the document in as much as possible needs to be tied to the UDO. So again, Laura has done and team have done much of that work. Thierry has a somewhat of a different, not different, I guess, added level of review in terms of the document, which is where the comp plan elements come into play. And Alicia, I think, has, or actually Allison did some of that work, and Alicia now has that document and can help tie that piece together. So by the time we meet in this work session, this is like our final opportunity to clean it up, massage all parties involved. At the end of that meeting, we have a document to deliver within 24, 48 hours to the commission, so that the commission has a full week in advance of the next planning commission meeting to review, provide comments. And then we move on June 8th. This work session I have requested happened between last Friday and Memorial Day. That's a very tight window. So when I say in as much as possible, as many of us as possible, I understand that, you know, some of our May calendars may be booked, but I have asked Allison, Dave, Laura, at this point, maybe even Alicia, I would leave that to Allison's discretion. And then the three parties who work to create the work on this document and myself be in the same room during this work session. So Candace, with her magic wand, is going to figure out a way to review schedules and see what day is best to schedule a work session. And that is the update on rezoning considerations. I will say that as I've kind of, I think I've said this before, I know I have an executive committee, but I'll say it for the ears of the entire commission, that this document has gotten a lot of attention. And there are some expectations that have been built around it. We, as a commission, will continue to manage those expectations, of course, but continue also to listen to folks who have participated in review and offering comments, those like the city's Office of Sustainability and Resiliency, the county's Office of Sustainability and Resiliency, different city council committees, and different county commission committees have all laid eyes on this document, have all expressed either a kudos or what's next, or, what is this document about? So I look forward to allowing the subcommittee to continue the work to bring forth a document for full commission consideration prior to June 1st, for your review, study, and commentary prior to June 8th, so that when we get to June 8th, everyone is ready to vote. And I will offer our subcommittee members who are working on work program item number 7. You guys looked at the agenda packet. I think the last page or pages of this agenda packet was an updated work program, which reflected this work program item, this new item, as number 7. Work program item number 7, Blumenthal, Wilden, and Russell. Do you have any comments?
Two things. I guess first and foremost is we thank you for acknowledging again that the subcommittee is involved. It feels like we have actually been removed from that process. And while I'm glad that everybody was provided their own soapbox, I would like an acknowledgement that, we did create this and look forward to the opportunity to engage going forward, because it feels like that has actually been removed. Number 2, for zoning committee members, while we work towards adopting this, I just want to make sure that everyone on the current and future zoning committee is aware, these are questions that we have been considering for years. Our intention was to put it in writing to kind of increase consistency and make sure that everybody had it in front of them at each zoning committee meeting. But again, none of this is new. None of this is novel, right? It's things that we've been considering for years that we are attempting to put into writing. And so if you're on the zoning committee, I would encourage you to just keep that in mind as we go forward, because while yes, the intention will definitely be to have this adopted in a month, best laid plans and all that, right? So I would encourage you to just keep that in mind as we factor, as we make our decisions and we evaluate the rezoning petitions, because again, none of what we're proposing is new. And so hopefully prior to adoption, it's still something that we keep in mind in the decisions that we make.
I would echo Commissioner Blumenthal's thoughts. This is merely a list of things to keep in mind as you review. We are not asking for any enforcement power, nor are we asking for there to be a wholesale change to anything that's done on the rezoning committee. This is really just a way to memorialize what we already do, to give us some things that we should look at top of mind, because quite frankly, we are a city of 1 million people and we're going to continue to grow. And so it's going to require us to be more judicious in our decision-making. And it's going to require us to think of things that we probably haven't thus to the point considered. And so that's all this is. It's consideration and memorialization of things that we already do. And I hope that the members of this esteemed commission will take that in mind as we move forward. Thank you.
Are there any questions regarding the information we just delivered? To button up the conversation here, the list of rezoning considerations are, to Blumenthal's point, nothing on that list is new. Every single item in that list has been something that we have asked about in my 6 years on the Planning Commission in one shape, form, or fashion. Probably not on every rezoning petition, but certainly many of those questions we're consistently asking, whether it be inside of the zoning committee work session or in our diligence prior to, as you are reviewing rezoning petitions to prepare for a work session meeting. So again, nothing new, but it's not a new concept, like Blumenthal said. To basically, land use and policy is probably one of the biggest factors when it comes to environmental impact. And because that's the business of the commission, we always hear about transportation concerns. We always hear about affordability around council dais. We always hear about schools and overcrowding, but air quality, water quality, drainage issues, all the stuff, the other important stuff that affects everybody's daily life, whether it be your commute to your backyard, to where you eat, work, and play, they tend to fall by the wayside in some of our decision-making. And so this document just kind of help lifts up some of those items that we can have the power to do so. And so that the rezoning considerations, which is its current name, it's just that. Many of the items that are in here can directly be tied to a policy within the UDO. Everything in it can be tied to a comp plan goal. And so it is kind of like that tug of war. I don't want to call it that because it's not a conflict at all. But basically, how do we format the document to tie to comp plan and UDO and make it a workable document without adding anything additional to the zoning committee's workload, because that's not the intent of the document. The document is, hey, remember to ask these questions also, right? And so that's where we're at with the rezoning considerations. Candace has her magic wand ready and waiting. And so we'll see what comes out of this next meeting, but it is my intent and die on the hill goal that there will be a document delivered to you by June 1st for your review, consideration, and commentary. There will be a vote on 6/8. With that, next agenda item is what we all came here for. Ms. Mahoney, can you please join us at the dais for the 353 millionth time,
Okay, so you're
And
being
update us.
sarcastic.
Yes.
Thank you.
and update us.
I was a little nervous
I
there.
know, update us on what we've been doing with comp plan implementation and community area planning.
Sure, I won't take long. So as you have mentioned, I'm Catherine Mahoney, and I'm here to provide another update on community area planning. As a reminder, it is the next step in putting our comprehensive plan into action, and the outcome will provide more detailed guidance for smaller geographies. When I say more detailed guidance, I mean guidance for future development and redevelopment. The first phase of the project was completed in the winter of 2023, this year. And in that phase, we built upon the work of the comprehensive plan by translating or identifying each geography's greatest needs in terms of their access to housing choices, access to employment opportunities, the need for access to goods and services, and then the level of environmental impacts within their community. That work was summarized in the community reports, which are available on our project website. And we've now moved into phase 2, which will run throughout the rest of the year. In this in this phase, what we're doing is we're focusing on the place type designations within our adopted policy map and looking to make sure that these designations are aligned with the community's needs. So if one geography needs better access to housing, what place type designations could we refine in order to improve that access? So that's kind of the scope that we're looking at for the rest of this year. As we're doing this work, we're using a series of engagement opportunities to meet the community. Significantly are our workshops, which some of you have attended, and we thank you for that. We're offering 3 workshops per geography. And so that's a Tuesday virtual session, a Thursday evening in-person session, and a Saturday morning session. So far, we've completed workshops for 3 of the 14 geographies, and we have workshops for the Southwest Outer coming up on May 16th, 18th, and 20th. So far, the attendance has been low, but the conversations have been really robust, and we've captured all of the feedback that we've received on our website. So you're welcome to peruse that there. In short, the feedback that we've heard has really affirmed the vision of the comprehensive plan and the goals. So we believe that we're headed in the right direction.
They've also, these workshops have given us an opportunity to clear up some of the misconceptions of the comprehensive plan, and then helped us feel confident that the process we've designed will be able to address the outstanding needs. So we're continuing to promote the workshops through a series of outlets. We're using our social media handles, paying to send out targeted ads in low participation areas. We are using radio announcements, door knockers, so hanging notifications on doors in low participation areas, using our email blasts, particularly to our neighborhood leaders and our coalition leaders, sending them personal invitations, and then working with Housing and Neighborhood Services to promote these workshops at neighborhood meetings. And all of the content that we prepare and share at the workshops are available online. And so we'll continue to promote and market that material through the rest of this year as well. And so our request or our ask of you all is to continue to support the effort by promoting it through your networks. Attend if you're available and interested. And if you'd like to help facilitate, we have the Thursday trainings. They occur the Thursday before the week of workshops. That might be the simplest way to describe it. So that's all I have. Are there any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. No questions, right? Didn't see any hands raised. And now, as you've heard through, I think all of this year, we have been focusing on infrastructure matters that are important to the work that we do, that are important to consider in our decision-making. And sometimes we might assume we have an understanding of what different departments do or contribute to the built environment. But as we have been exploring over the past several months, we'll continue exploring that today. We will hear from Charlotte Water and Stormwater Services. As we know, Charlotte Water and Stormwater Services, as I continue to watch zoning committee work sessions, those type topics are kind of becoming a recurring theme and are getting a lot of attention, and is the source of angst amongst many of our communities. Some of the issues that are best explained by Charlotte Water or Stormwater Services is what we'll hear today. I think we have David Bobna-Curie here from Charlotte Water. They will go first and help us understand a couple things. What projects that are underway that may contribute to a better understanding for us in our decision-making, how they create their long-range plan, at what intervals do they revisit those plans, whether it be CIP or other long-range plans, and then how they will describe for us their process for rezoning review. And I know there are a lot of people who are interested in hearing that information. So with that, David, Bobna, and Curie, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here today. I'm David Zur, Deputy Director with Charlotte Water. We welcome this opportunity to share with you our infrastructure that a lot of times is out of sight, out of mind, underground, but nonetheless very, very important for the community and the growth that we're seeing here. And so I've got two of my colleagues here today. We have Bobna Swayampakala, who is in charge of our planning group, and Dr. Carrie Cantrell, who is our chief engineer over the planning and land development areas. And Carrie is going to kick us off in this presentation, and then Bobna has some slides, and I will kind of come in at the end. So thank you.
All right, so I have the easy part. I get to just to run through metrics. They have to explain everything, so you all.
If you could stand a little closer to the mic
Sure.
so our streaming audience can be able to participate.
Sure. So the next couple of slides are just to give you a scope of what Charlotte Water handles as far as our water and wastewater services. As you can see from the picture on the screen, we have a lot of facilities that we manage, from treatment plants as well as field operations facilities. And we support 7 counties with our water and wastewater services. We support communities in South Carolina as well. So we truly are becoming a regional utility provider. One of those pinnacle points are going to be the Stowe Regional Water Reuse Recovery Facility, Water Resource Recovery Facility that's expected to come online in 2026. That's in the western part of our county. And with that wastewater treatment facility, we are going to start accepting flows from Mount Holly and Belmont. So again, just demonstrating we are becoming a regional utility provider. Who knows our drinking water sources? Anybody want to shout one out? Yes, Mountain Island and Lake Norman. So Lake Norman is in the north where our Lee Dukes facility is. And so a lot of that water just stays up in the Cornelius, Davidson, Huntersville area. Our largest facility is on the Catawba River at Mountain Island Lake. And that we have 120-inch pipes that transfer water from that intake down to our Franklin treatment plant on Brookshire. So just to kind of give you some ideas of, yes, you could drive a truck through some of our pipes. There we go. So just some statistics for last fiscal year. Our staff own, maintain, operate, test, replace, repair, rehab over 9,000 miles of pipe. We could go to Alaska and back and make a few detours. So again, just to give you the scope of what we do. We pump almost 120 million gallons per day. I can't tell you how many swimming pools that is, but that's a lot. We turn around and treat about 80 million gallons a day of wastewater at our facilities. And with our customer service staff, they're helping maintain over 320,000 active accounts, active water meters. Our financial team has done a fantastic job as well as being led by our director. We've maintained a AAA rating with 3 different agencies, which in turn assists with our reduced rates and helps our ratepayers ultimately. A gallon of water costs 4 cents. So that Deer Park water that, I'm sorry, I probably shouldn't say any specific one, but that bottled water that you buy in the convenience store, that's $3.50, $5 a bottle. Just think that you could fill up for 4 cents from the tap. So of course, we try and promote that. So we serve over 1 million population. So really, if you are anywhere, just about anywhere in Mecklenburg County, you drink, wash, flush, or brush, you are dealing with our services.
Thank you, Carrie. My team is the planning team, which kind of does the long-term planning within Charlotte Water. We have basically 3 groups. One focuses on the capacity assurance program, and the other 2 are both on the master planning efforts and basin studies for the sanitary sewer side and the water distribution side. So before getting into the rezoning petition, I want to give you a little background on how we come up with different analysis within the planning group to kind of comment on the petitions or any other long-term goals. As Carrie mentioned, we are part of a larger community. Our main source of water is the Catawba. And as you can see, we are a very small part of it. And Catawba Water Management Group, they kind of have their own master plan that kind of focuses on what can be provided to the community. And since we are a small part of it, we have a huge responsibility of understanding what's available to us and what can be provided, as Charlotte Water's main goal is to serve the community. Talking a little bit about our water distribution system, what you're seeing here is our pressure map. This is basically showing how pressures are for the water distribution system in the entire county. And these are based on elevations. So when we are looking at our water distribution system, we always obviously have a master plan, which we update every 5 years. And we take input from like growth, like we have been using the comprehensive plans for the planning, what the planning department has recently finished. And we look at our consumption data to kind of update our master plan. But the other focus we have to look at is how's the water quality? Our customer getting redundant flows from different areas when there's a line break. And we also have to make sure we have a very resilient system, at the same time have the capacity for fire flows in the system. So it's not just growth related to population, but other factors that we have to look at when we're looking at master planning efforts. Similarly, on the wastewater side, we have like 7 different wastewater treatment plants, and they are like bigger basins. We definitely look at flow projections, again, getting input from our comprehensive plan. We recently finished, like in March 2023, finished our first wastewater master plan. We took input from the comprehensive plan and used the community viz model to kind of do our projections. But we also had to look at all the other regulatory requirements, like the permits we need at different wastewater treatment plants, if we are meeting that, and perform our capacity analysis. So part of that, what we have for both on the water side and the wastewater side is some of the hydraulic models that kind of runs these models for all the infrastructure in the system and kind of tells us where we have capacity, but these are larger trunk lines. So David's going to talk more about that part of how they are divided, but this is a bigger picture of how we do our master planning. The third thing that our group does, and which is crucial for the rezoning petition part, is our capacity assurance program. This was instituted in 2009. We basically look at all the infrastructure within the sewer lines to make sure we have enough capacities and we are not overflowing the sanitary sewer system, because that will be a huge regulatory EPA issue if we have those SSOs. So coming from where the customer flushed the toilets to the local gravity sewers, we take it to the big trunk sewers, and then the biggest ones that go to the treatment plant, like Carrie was saying, 120 inch. Some of our largest sanitary sewer lines are about 72 inches. So that's what we look at, and we do the analysis when we get inquiry. So how do we look at a rezoning petition? So in this case, you know, this is that Audrey Kill multifamily. This is just like an example I got here to show you. So this area was rezoned from a residential 3 to a multi-use, you know, and what we typically look at is sewer available, is water available, and is accessible. But something which the capacity assurance program also does is it requires the developers to submit a pre-cap, which is a due diligence stage review that we require the developers to send to us so that we can previously look at stuff and say, hey, you may have a capacity issue in this basin. And then we ask them, when they have a complete site plan done for that particular project, when they're ready to build, before that stage, we ask them to submit something called a CAP application, which is the Capacity Assurance Program application. This application is required for any development that is going to have an 1.5 inch and larger tap. Basically, not like some single family house that wants to connect to our system, but like bigger developments which have 1.5 inch and larger tap. So what we do when we get a rezoning petition is the first thing we check is whether there's sewer available, water available. And the next step I check is, did they submit a pre-cap? Did they submit the CAP application? And we have a way to track that. We have a web-based application where we look at it, where all these are entered, and then evaluate. So typically what happens is during the pre-cap and CAP application, if there is a capacity issue we identified, we kind of tell them there's a capacity issue and we have identified a project. So in this case, when the zoning changed, our local collection system didn't have the capacity to handle that much flows. So we identified a project and then we put it in our system, in our CIP, saying we'll go and serve this project by completing this infrastructure project. And David's going to explain more about how the local collection systems kind of impact us. David?
Thank you, Bhavna. So I think my role in this presentation is to explain why planning for growth is both easy and difficult, and what some of those challenges are. So I'm going to show this slide as the first of 4 that will look similar at a high level, but I want you to watch. We use a tree as an example of our sewer system. And I'll pause for a second and note that when we're talking about growth and the impact to Charlotte Water, we often talk more about the sewer system than the water system. And that's for a reason. The water system is a little more flexible. It's a little more redundant. It's pressurized, and we can take that water wherever we want to or need to, whereas the sewer system operates off of gravity. So it follows the natural contours of the land, similar to our compatriots at Stormwater. And it is pretty locked in. It has to go where it goes. And think of it as a series of one-way streets. When a new building or development happens, that sewer really only has one path to get from that point of connection all the way downstream to the treatment facility. So that's why it becomes more of a focal point for us when we are talking about our growth. So we use the tree as an example and say that the big green area, the leaves, you've got your small, are they twigs? I think they're twigs, then your branches, your trunk, and then down at the base where the roots are, that's our wastewater treatment plant. And Bhavna had a map up earlier that showed we have several of these basins that are kind of like the trees. And this is where planning is easier for us. And don't confuse easy with inexpensive or quick. But when we get the information from planning and it looks at long-term projections and growth and where that is going to happen, it's almost irrespective on that tree where it happens. As long as it's somewhere in the tree, as long as we know it's somewhere in North Charlotte or Huntersville, we're looking at a macro scale. And if we know that the growth is going to increase at 2% a year, or that by 2035, we're going to have an extra 200,000 residents in that part of town, we can make plans for the big pipes and the trunk sewers, the wastewater treatment plant, the trunk of the tree and the roots. And we can know with some certainty that regardless of where specifically that development happens, it's going to find its way to the trunk. It's going to find its way through those big pipes and down to our treatment plant. Those are our bigger projects. They are the expensive projects, but they are the ones that we can plan for with a little more lead time and a little more certainty. And I'll get to a slide later that shows the work we have going on now, but we have a multitude of these going on. And these are usually long-term projects. We like to have several years of advance awareness of them. We populate them in our CIP. They cost tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars, and often take 2, 3, 4, 5 years to complete. So in the next slide, the red circles, we now start to talk about the sub-basin planning. And so here we're getting down a little bit to a finer detail of knowing sometimes it's the community plans that inform this. Of course, we work with the towns, and they likewise have their own version of area plans or identified areas for growth. And that tells us these kind of medium-sized pipes. And a lot of our system was built in the 70s and in the 80s, and that was back when it was single family residences. And it was not designed for the kind of redevelopment and high density growth we're seeing now. So that's why we have Bhavna and her team, and they analyze these pipes and see what it can hold. But these are the trunk sewers that are along the creeks. These are the pipes that are sometimes in people's backyards and floodplains and along the greenways. And out of this level of planning, we can say we have an existing 15-inch pipe, and our projections say it needs to be a 36, and we have a target date, and we monitor that. We have flow monitors in the system. We keep abreast of the latest data, and then we decide when we need to pull the trigger, spend that money, and go replace or upsize that sewer line. When you get down to the next smaller level, I guess we're at the branches and twigs scale here on our tree. This is when we're looking at some localized areas. And we met with Huntersville last week, and we were talking about a big project that may or may not be coming their way. And it's starting to get down. It's more than just a development or a neighborhood, but it is getting down to a finer level. And here, what starts to differentiate this is the projects get a little bit smaller. So in that regard, they're a little easier, they're a little quicker, they're a little more affordable. But the timing of when that development is going to occur starts to become more critical. We have and there's a slide that I think was missing here as I was standing up here, and we have a lot of different competing drivers in our world. And one of those I'll go ahead and mention, and that's keeping our rates affordable for our community. And so while we can have a crystal ball and it can be pretty good, what we don't want to do, what we can't do is go out and spend money that we don't need to spend before we need to spend it. That wouldn't be following our role as good stewards of the ratepayers' contributions to our utility. When you get down to the local gravity pipelines, these are where a development, and if it's uptown, that can be a particular building. If you're in South End, it can be a new mixed use type development, and they can have all the impact on the world on an 8-inch sewer line. An 8-inch sewer line can handle about 500,000 gallons of sewer flow a day. We now see specific developments that can generate 500,000 gallons of sewer a day. In the old days, an 8-inch sewer handled a neighborhood. Nowadays, it might, but it also might not. And so this is where a lot of times the rezonings come in. That goes to Bhavna and her team, and they're looking at it and trying to figure out the impact to these very localized lines. We have had projects where we get it for review, and it's in a particular area where there might be 2 options of where they can discharge their sewer. It goes to 2 different parts of our system, and literally how they decide to grade the site and where they decide to put their on-site plumbing can make the difference whether we have a $500,000 project to the west or a $5 million project to the east. And so a level of detail that we would all want to have so that we could make those accurate, informed, and early decisions. Sometimes you don't have it as early as you want to. And that's where the planning piece for us and the growth projections, it starts to get a little more difficult. This literally comes down to some very finite details. And sometimes during the rezonings, we have that, and sometimes we don't, and we need that. And that's why we encourage, and we always encourage, and we have a team built around it for people to come in early and talk to us. The developers come in even when it's a twinkle in your eye and talk to us, and we can look at our system and we can start to navigate that for you. This is also an area where we have another challenge, and that is the frequency of this. This is the redevelopment stuff very frequently. It's the frequency and it's the cost. It is one thing to build an 18-inch sewer. It's another thing to build it in an urban or urbanized corridor where we have competing utilities and the price of real estate is high, and we have to go out and acquire a 30-foot right-of-way for that pipe to live in. It's very high. And so we are looking at ways for it to have a developer contribution. We're seeking that with these because it is a specific development that really can trigger the need for a project for us. And so we're exploring some ways for the developers to contribute to this. So the result of everything that Carrie described as our system and what we operate, and Bhavna and her team that they analyze and they look at constantly 365 days a year, results in something for us that we do annually. And that's our capital improvement plan. And this is a once a year effort for us. It is meshed in as a part of our budget. And it is a significant portion of our budget. Our investment in our infrastructure is the biggest part of our annual budget. A lot of this is bond funded. This plays heavily into our rates that we have for our fees and our volumetric that our ratepayers pay for water and sewer. And here, this shows our current 5-year CIP. And you can see the total is over $2.5 billion for 5 years worth of projects. And you ask how many that is, it's probably 120. Okay. 120 projects, 120 line items. Now, some of those are evergreen programs. that we know we need to do. I'll give you a weird example you might not think of, but we have 17 facilities. Some of those treatment plants have dozens of buildings and there are roofs on them. We spend well over $1 million a year continually replacing roofs. So those kind of things live on, but others are specific and discrete. We go in and we will replace, as we're doing now, the Little Hope Creek sewer in South Charlotte. And hopefully that will be good for another several generations when we do that. We break down our CIP into where we're spending that money. The vast majority of it are projects that we consider needed for accommodating growth in our community. The next biggest is our rehab and replacement. That's reinvesting in our system. Pipes only last so long. Either they age out or they become too small. And we want to stay on top of that. And if you think of how a system like Charlotte Water came to exist from the very early 1900s, we have a lot of pipe in our system that is aging out. But the big growth of our system occurring in the 60s, 70s, and 80s means we're getting ever more pipe that is nearing the end of its useful life. And so we have to program that in, and we have a whole team devoted to just that reinvestment. Regulatory requirements, the world changes. EPA administers their overarching rules down to the state of North Carolina, and they come along and they will describe a new parameter that you have to treat for in your water treatment facility, and you need to become in compliance with that. And then lastly is our commitment to other public projects and utility operations is the smallest piece of our CIP. Quickly, you can see at the top there, if you cannot read it, that's fiscal year 11 through 15. So over 10 years ago, and you can see how much our capital program has grown. That's reflective of the growth that we've seen in Charlotte. There's no other way to put it. So our capital program used to hover at around $500 to $750 million. And our latest projection for the next 5 years will be at $2.6 to $2.7 billion. And this slide has what we're proposing for our 24 to 28 CIP. Again, most of it dedicated to that growth component. The map, I doubt anybody can read it. I cannot read it, but it shows a portion of those 120 projects and how they are spread out throughout the community from up north in Davidson down to Pineville and east to west. We have infrastructure everywhere, and that infrastructure needs upgrading, it needs replacing, and our capital program reflects that. So I think that brings us to the end of our presentation, and I certainly wanted to allow some time for questions and hope that you all would have some.
So in January, we had Housing and Neighborhood Services present to us. In February, we had Corridors of Opportunity. In March, we had Charlotte Water. In April, in March, we had Charlotte Fire. And in April, we had CMS. And now we have Charlotte Water Sewer. Next presentation will be Charlotte Stormwater. We have been focusing on infrastructure because number one, it's kind of in alignment with where council's focus has been. But also number two, to help add more context to our decision-making, because all of what I mentioned in some shape, form, or fashion, we have offered recommendations or a vote to approve or deny. We have several hands raised here. And for the sake of time, I'm going to reserve my questions for an email. Commissioner Lansdale, Commissioner Blumenthal, and I had an opportunity in April or late March to attend an event hosted by the UNC Charlotte's Urban Institutes called Net Positive Watershed Development in the City of Creeks. And there were so many light bulbs that went off. I didn't get a chance to circle back with Commissioner Blumenthal, but Commissioner Lansdale and I were able to attend the panel discussion. And so many questions that we had in that room that it would have been very beneficial to have a Charlotte Water team member there to kind of address the audience's questions. So my questions will kind of be in concert along that presentation and this. I am going to go around the dais, starting with Commissioner Seeley, and work my way around.
My question was really about mapping GIS. I don't think I've ever actually seen a really comprehensive GIS for Charlotte Water. Is something like that exist? Is it on Charlotte Explorer and I've just missed it?
No, yes and no. So yes, we have it. That was something that was created in the early 2000s. Our infrastructure is considered sensitive by Department of Homeland Security. And so that information is not out there for public consumption. We recognize the need for the development community and engineers. And so if folks want to come into our office, they have to sign a non-disclosure form, get some information, and we can share sections of that with them. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. That's it.
The questions I have range and maybe too lengthy to respond to them now. So if you want to reply via email, that's fine too. But I've got, so in no particular order, how much is lost in terms of water that you pump into the system versus how much is flowing through the meters? The other questions are, and it's the light bulbs went off with me talking about the sewer. Is the sewer the majority of what you end up having to spend money on versus the pumping of the water? And I had another question, but I can't remember it. Thank you very much.
I'll take a quick stab at your two questions. You're right. We withdraw water and then we send it out to our customers. Some of it is lost, some of it for good reason. Starting at the reservoirs, we have evaporative losses. If we have any leaks in our system, some of that can be lost. It's usually fairly small. Sometimes we have older water meters that need to be replaced that aren't quite counting it accurately. And then we don't count the fire protection use. And so the fire department, whether they're using it to put out a fire or they're using it to test the system, that's not water that we track, and it's considered lost. So there is some of that. You're right about that. Sewer is disproportionately more expensive for a number of reasons. And you're right. I don't have that breakdown in my head. I would guess it's 2/3, 1/3, 60/40. Sewer, a new treatment plant costs somewhere in the mid $35 per gallon range to build. Water treatment plants somewhere in the $20 per gallon range. The pipe is more expensive because it has to be laid at a perfect slope, whereas the water pipeline can go up and down a little bit and it's usually shallower. So the costs are more for wastewater.
The last question had to do with some of the upcoming challenges in the water treatment. Where do we stand compared to other places in the country on things like forever chemicals and stuff? So again,
that's a Pandora's box question, but let me just share this with the group because it is absolutely valid. It is out there. It is it's in the news constantly. EPA is looking at it. These are the chemicals that have a very long name, the PFOAs and the PFASs. I'm not a scientist. Those are the Gen X chemicals, if you've heard of them. They're the waterproofing. They're on your hamburger wrappers. They are out there in the community very much. What I can say about Charlotte Water is that even before it hit the news, we have been for a couple of years doing proactive testing to understand our water system, both from the raw water source all the way through finished water. And the results we've had are very promising. The ability to test for that, this is new and emerging technology, and the limits that they are suggesting is near or even less than the ability of the testing equipment to produce accurate tests. And still our numbers are coming in at less than that, often in non-detect. So we have been doing a great job, and I think we are well positioned, but it's an emerging area.
For commissioners following Commissioner Winokur, please state your name ahead of any questions. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm not sure who this is going to go to, and we have to reserve it. No big deal for me. Just had a question. We've got
Commissioner Lansdale.
Sorry, Lansdale. Commissioner Lansdale. I have a question. It can wait if we have to take it offline. But my question, and overarching is where are we at in our system capacity? And I'll let you answer that in just a moment. We understand that there are at least 3 different bills that are happening and moving through their state legislature right now that impacts our code enforcement and zoning requirements for stormwater, wastewater services based upon capacity, and also some other secondary impact issues associated with the CIP opportunity and funding those improvements. So where are we at in our capacity? Maybe that can kind of solve my question for right now.
Yeah, excuse me. On the water side, we have a fair amount of additional capacity to the point that we don't have an expansion planned for our water treatment plants. Truthfully, the type of growth that Charlotte sees and more of multifamily, those use less water than traditional single family. So our per capita amount has been decreasing over the years, which is good. The growth is kind of balanced by that water savings there. So we have plenty of additional capacity on the water side. On the wastewater side, it's broken up a little bit into those basins, those wastewater treatment plants that we have. But that is back to what I said earlier, that's the easier part for us to know with a level of accuracy that growth is going to happen and roughly where. And so we currently have the new Stowe wastewater facility that has been under construction now for a while and will be completed. That's out in Northwest Charlotte near the Whitewater Center. That will come online and give us about 12 million gallons of capacity. We are working on a capacity expansion at our Mallard Creek wastewater treatment plant out in the university area. And then in kind of the heart in South Charlotte, we have 3 treatment facilities there, and we've done extensive upgrades on those, and they're sitting good in terms of the percent of their capacity.
A quick follow-up, if I may. In the state, in one of the bills, and I think this one will be S673, which is going straight to rules probably next week. You mentioned that certain types of facilities use less water than others. The state generally classifies in this bill at 75 gallons per day per bedroom. So as a planning commission, I think that's a significant detail to keep in mind. If the state's going to define that, it may impact our ability to make decisions on future zoning projects. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome.
Hi, this is Commissioner Welton. The Little Hope Creek wastewater project literally will be in my backyard next year. Question about capacity. Stephen Scott is doing that project, and on a couple of occasions when I've seen Stephen talk, give community meetings and things, he said that the wastewater capacity in that area is just about tapped out. I wanted to get your feedback on that because I know we also have some rezonings coming that way, and some of the community members are like, oh, we can't have a rezoning because the wastewater is all tapped out. So if you can just kind of high level me on that.
Yeah,
one.
that was probably one of the mid slides I did of the tree in terms of the size of the Little Hope Creek project. And we are doing that because of growth we have seen and growth that we know is coming. One thing that we found is even in some of our, how would I say, the projects, the development projects that have sprung up from out of nowhere and surprised us. And we've said, looked at our system and said we needed some kind of capacity enhancement. You have to remember that development typically takes at least 18 months, bigger projects, 24 to 30 months before they are actually using or discharging any wastewater. And so that allows us the that lead time to construct those projects. And everything that Bhavna and her team does, the engineering, the regulatory components, they have a bit of built-in safety factor, conservatism to them. And so while it's not an untrue statement that we're doing that project there at Little Hope Creek because of capacity concerns, it's not as though one day a mom and pop builds a new single family home and they can't flush their toilet. So it's nearing, but it's not in a bad spot. And we will have that project done and it will allow that growth to continue.
Okay, that's what I didn't want to have an overlap where there's like no flushing.
That will not happen. That will not happen.
That would be bad. Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And before Commissioner Russell, just keep in mind, we have a 30-minute presentation from Charlotte Water, we want to reserve time for questions. I'm sorry, for Stormwater Services. And we have about 2 more items of business after. So again, if our questions aren't necessarily pressing for or related to the presentation, if we could do a follow-up, but let's continue around the dais, but try to keep our questions more concise. Thank you.
Hi, Commissioner Russell, quick question about water capacity and wastewater capacity. I know that there's been some rumors going around University City about capacity, and we've got several very large rezonings in the area. So I'm glad that you're here, and I wanted to get that straight from you. Do we have capacity issues from from wastewater and for water distribution in the University City area?
No, you do not. We're completing the first part of a multi-year expansion out at that treatment facility, and that's going on time as scheduled. And then we have a second one that is following directly on its heels. So we have that covered. You may be hearing a little bit about the capacity limitations that are on the eastern part of our county that flow over to our neighbors in Cabarrus County. And they are actively working that project, and it's scheduled to come online, the first part of that, in sometime in summer of 24. You're welcome.
Commissioner Wilden, mine is a yes or no, so it'll be super fast. In what way, or let me rephrase for a yes or no. Is climate change factored into long-range planning, considering like extreme weather, drought, increased temperatures, increased erosion?
Yes,
Good to hear. I'm done.
it is.
Commissioner Blumenthal, this will be quick as well. First, just want to applaud you on being proactive instead of purely reactive on a lot of this. I think that, outside of Charlotte and Mecklenburg County, we're seeing that reactive approach really stunting growth and really having an impact on what they're trying to accomplish. Only question that I truly had is you mentioned that a lot of the infrastructure is frequently or kind of always needing to be replaced. As you're working, and it may be different with water versus wastewater, but what is the current useful life of the pipes that you're putting into the ground now?
There is no defined answer for that. I can tell you that we have some pipes in our system that date back to the turn of the century before, the early 1900s, that are still in perfectly serviceable condition. A lot of it is the soils that are in contact with the pipe. It's the pipe material. And sometimes it's the activity that happens above ground that may impact it. But I would say generally, if you opened an engineering textbook, it would tell you 50 years.
Okay, thank you.
Phil Gussman, Commissioner Gussman. I'll be quick as well. As a CLA grad, by the way, I really enjoyed the presentation that we received at that on your servicing techniques and all of that, by the way. Fascinating. Gave me a lot of confidence in our water system. But my question is a little bit more combined with some of the other commissioners and how we're going to deal with. So our new UDO, we are theoretically going to see some level of increased density throughout our city, even on a small scale, not just the big projects. The big projects, you've already done a good job explaining you can easily plan for and anticipate. If we see communities turn into areas of townhomes and more duplexes and things like that, I know it's a smaller increment. Are you guys adjusting your planning with the adoption of the UDO?
Yes, we are absolutely taking that into account. I will caution that this is where the timing piece comes in. I am confident that Bhavna and her folks could take the UDO and tell us at ultimate UDO type build out, everything that needs to happen. We can't do it all at once. And so that's where the timing piece comes in. And sometimes we get early indicators that an area is going to, redevelop. And sometimes we don't find out until a set of plans gets submitted.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
This is Commissioner Rhodes. I submitted my questions. I already had a few, so just in the effort of time, you'll receive those. I sent them over to Chairwoman McKee.
Sure, thank you.
Hi, Commissioner Shaw. Just one hopefully fairly simple question. I'm assuming based on the
large capital improvement numbers you put up, that you do not remove the sewer pipes when you put in new, larger infrastructure in areas. Are there long-term environmental, soil erosion, other impacts of that concern you all? Or is that kind of the best practice or typical practice?
Actually, most of the time we are removing the old pipe. There are occasions where we won't, if one pipe's on one side of the creek and we put in the new pipe on the other, and that avoids creek crossings. But we normally actually do, and land is at a premium. It's hard for us to get enough land to own and operate and maintain that swath for dual pipes.
Thank you, David, Bhavna, and Carrie, for your presentation and your time today in preparation for this presentation. As I've indicated, we will probably contact one of you. Which one is best, probably, or Carrie? Okay, to send over some follow-up questions. And thank you so very much for the consideration in advance.
Absolutely, but there is one thing I was advised by somebody that I should have an ask at the end of this. And so my ask is kind of simple, and it's a lot of what we've been doing. But first, thank you for taking the time to note what we do is vitally important to the community. And my ask would be to take some of what you've learned today or through the follow-up questions and keep that on the forefront of your mind as you continue to do the good job that you do. And that if you have questions for us, to know that we're always available to answer them, and we would be happy to do so. Okay.
Charge accepted. Thank you
All right.
so very
Thank
much.
you. Thank you.
Mr. Zink, I think you have company now that wasn't present at the top of our meeting. Welcome, everybody. Robbie Zink of Stormwater Services will now. Sorry. No problem. Is she all right? This correct? Yeah. We contemplated splitting Charlotte Water and Storm Water, but because you both have the word water in your titles, we figured we tag team these two. So thank you so very much for making time, Robbie. And with that, and continuation of focus on infrastructure items, the floor is yours.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Again, I'm Robbie Zink. I'm Stormwater Services Regulatory Division Manager. I oversee the Surface Water Quality and Environmental Permitting Group, as well as the Land Development Program. I'd like to thank my fellow One Water employees over here for their great presentation before. So thank you for that. And I apologize, you have to look at me for the next 20 minutes. So. Start with stormwater's, our purpose, our mission statement is to serve the city of Charlotte by improving surface waters and conveying rainwater safely throughout a well-maintained storm drainage system. And our vision is to strengthen the community for generations to come as a national leader in sustainable, equitable, and comprehensive stormwater management. And just like our water and sewer, you can't have great places or spaces in neighborhoods without adequate stormwater. So we're trying to prepare our infrastructure for the future and also to be sustainable because we have to comply with the Federal Clean Water Act. We are a joint city-county utility. So with Mecklenburg County, we have clearly defined responsibilities. If you think about David's kind of tree trunk example, the county kind of manages the trunk. So anything draining greater than a square mile, which is also regulated by FEMA as well, they're the ones who manage that. And the city handles all the minor upstream systems, pipes and ditches, which is a much larger portion of the system to maintain. We also rely on the county for monitoring for our Clean Water Act efforts. They do creek sampling, and they also use Charlotte Water's labs for testing those samples. So we also use common design manuals, actually throughout the county, most of the towns use those as well. And we are have oversight by the Stormwater Advisory Committee, or also called SWAC. SWAC is composed of 9 residents. They're appointed by council, county commission, and town commissioners. They meet monthly to review our policy and hear appeals, decide violations. They also evaluate our capital programs and budgets, and they make recommendations. So what do we do? As you can see in these left-hand pictures, we got a flooding picture and we have a failed infrastructure picture. And on the right, we have pictures of construction of major projects. We have in-house designers. We have outside consultants and contractors to manage it and construct these projects. And as Charlotte Water also said, we are doing the same thing. We are mainly having to work in a built urban environment, which is extremely difficult and costly. We also do water quality enhancement projects and stream restorations. Those are to help comply with the Federal Clean Water Act. And also in these pictures, you can see is we organize community events, education events for schools to help with that outreach as well. And on the right-hand side, you see our mascot, Stormy. Our system plan, similar to the sewer plan, is laid out by nature. It's made up of 18 different watersheds, as you can see on this map. Each of these either drain to the Catawba River or to Rocky River. And our system demand is based on weather. So we don't know how much it's going to rain tomorrow. We designed to certain storms, but it could get bigger than that storm tomorrow. So we have over 5,000 miles of pipe and open channels that we're responsible for. Some FY22 stats as well is 700 projects managed, 250 completed, over almost 34,000 feet of pipe were installed or rehabbed, and 18,000 feet of stream restoration in progress. And also, as you know, I've talked about drainage complaints, over 3,000 drainage and surface water pollution concerns reported to 311 last year. So this slide is to kind of show you that development adds to a significant portion of the system each year, just like water and sewer. So here's an example, 210 lots on 76 acres, which installs over 11,000 feet of pipe. Another example, a 26-acre subdivision installed over 6,000 feet of pipe. And just over the past 2 years, you can see 76 single-family subdivisions and 140 multifamily subdivisions have been submitted. So you can kind of do the math, and it's a whole lot of infrastructure that we're getting. Next, we'll go on to the UDO. And there are 6 articles in the UDO that relate to stormwater. So Article 23 is water supply watersheds. 24 is drainage. 25 is post-construction stormwater. 26 is surface water improvement and management, or swim buffers. Article 27 is floodplain regulations, and 28 is soil erosion and sedimentation control. So I bolded 24 and 25. Those are the ones that have the most significant changes. Drainage is a brand new article for us. And post-construction, we did some significant changes to account for new development types. So next, I'll go through each of the ones that didn't really change, just real quick, just to give you some background information on those. And then we'll go more detail in the 24 and 25. So Article 23 is water supply watersheds. So basically, these are along the Catawba River and the lakes. These are to protect our drinking water. There are built upon area limits in this area. So basically, you can't put so much impervious on a lot for development. And there's additional stormwater controls for water quality and additional stream buffers as well. Article 26 is swim buffers. So these apply to any stream draining 100 acres or more. They have varying widths, and swim buffers obviously have various different benefits. You know, they protect water quality, they provide storage for floodwaters, and shade to reduce water temperatures, and provide habitat for wildlife. Article 27 is the floodplain regulations. Those are managed by the county. Those are the ones I mentioned before that drain greater than 1 square mile. So these regulations help to reduce impacts to people and property from flooding. It is a requirement of FEMA. We do have higher standards than FEMA. It applies to areas, I mentioned that, draining greater than 1 square mile. But there were some changes to this article, but they were done about 6 months before the UDO was adopted to account for modeling differences and different development patterns. Article 28 is the soil erosion and sedimentation control ordinance. It's basically to minimize erosion off of construction sites to protect surface water quality and minimize damage to our creeks and waterways. And it's also required by the Clean Water Act. This slide, I just want to tell you a little bit about land development stormwater review currently. And for the, I've been here 18 years, and since I've been here, it's the same, is generally land development for stormwater only reviews larger subdivisions and commercial, which is greater than 20,000 square feet of impervious. Well, as you can know, a lot of our development patterns are going to more infill and redevelopment types things. So we do not see individual single flat homes. We do get a lot of complaints about those, that we don't see them. There are exempt subdivisions. So say you have, 1, 2 acres of land, and you can create 3 parcels out of that without a review happening for stormwater. So Articles 24 and 25 are to help address infill and densification. So as I mentioned earlier, development patterns are changing in the city to more of an infill type projects, and city storm drainage requirements are not sufficient. So just kind of a theoretical kind of issues that we do see often is an existing single family subdivision, smaller homes that eventually gets redeveloped and creates numerous issues. So storm drainage blockages, the substandard infrastructure gets installed, so there's sinkholes. People build houses over pipes, and we get street flooding and stream erosion, all kinds of problems related to this. Next, we're just give a few examples of some infill development that's happened over the years. So 2019 on the left is, single family homes or duplex, I don't know what they are, but on the right, they've all been torn down. We built a lot more dense. This is something that never came to us for a review. So. Another example is 8 duplexes up on the top, and then a few townhouses. We did not see the duplex. They were on existing lots. We did see the townhouses, but on their own, they do not trigger any ordinances. But the people on the south of the page did receive some flooding. At that time, we were able to link it together as one developer was doing the whole thing. And we were able to apply some regulations to that and address some issues. Another example of an older single family neighborhood in 2009. And then you can see in 2023, so over the last 15 years, it is basically impervious. And it's not to say we're not against density and all that. I'm for density, but it can be managed properly through with stormwater techniques. So Article 24 is the brand new article for drainage. So basically the regulations of storm drainage are intended to the maximum extent practical to allow for the lawful and orderly development of lands within the city and ETJ while managing stormwater responsibility. Basically, this article applies to anything. So, any really building expansion, expansion of your house, a new house, tear down and rebuild. The article does apply to all of those. So next I'll give you some examples of issues that we've seen and why we wanted to create this article. A single family home, which we have a pipe where the blue line kind of is. We do actually have a stormwater easement on it, but the house was built over the top of it. Next example on the left-hand side is the prior to development. We go to the next picture is looking from the backyard. The homes on the left were constructed. You can see they filled in the lots significantly. They installed substandard drainage system, and they actually installed it poorly, as you can see. And those people's house had several feet of water after the first major rain. Another example of a tear down and rebuild where someone filled in the lot. After it was done, larger house and the neighbor's backyard floods. Another example of 4 single family homes rebuilt to 4 large duplexes, and just on the left-hand side of the street view picture is a creek. They raised, basically it's a retaining wall that's up against the creek. They raised it up. They lowered the elevation of the house. And I think the first significant rain here, they had water in the garage. So the key changes to this, it's a brand new article. Our current ordinance only enables storm drainage reviews for commercial, adding over 20,000 square feet and larger subdivisions. This expands the stormwater review to everything pretty much. So flood protection currently is only required for larger subdivisions, and that is beyond what the FEMA requirements are. This goes down to FEMA regulates your drainage areas of 1 square mile. You probably could go down to about 10 acres that would trigger a subdivision flood study. So the UDO extends those flood protections to all residential lots. I don't know how many times I could count over the years that I've been asked, can I build a house here? Like, you should do a flood study. And I said, we'll review it for free. And then I've never seen one. So next we'll go on to Article 25, which is the post-construction stormwater ordinance. Basically, the post-construction stormwater ordinance requires water quality and water quantity features to control the runoff on developments once it meets a certain threshold. And these are required by the city's Clean Water Act permit. And on the bottom, you can see what we call stormwater control measures. Basically, you got wet ponds, a sand filter in the middle, and I think that's a detention pond that somebody wanted to make look nice on the right. But those are all methods that people can use to control stormwater. So the key changes in this article are the applicability triggers differ based on commercial and residential currently. In 2 slides, I'll show in a little more detail what that is. In the UDO, we've consistently and lowered the trigger for all development to 5,000 square feet of new built upon area. Current ordinance requires redevelopment BUA controls, except for in 2018, the state legislature passed a bill that we could not require treatment for any redevelopment. This was a big portion of our program. It was a big tool that we had to improve water quality throughout the region, but we lost this ability. So during the UDO rewrite, we had to adopt that and actually putting it in writing. And by practice, we have been applying this for the last several years. Currently, there are mitigation options available in specific areas, along some transit corridors and all that. And most of these areas were areas that were redevelopment, and now we aren't getting treatment anyway. So now in the UDO, we've removed all those mitigation options, so the entire city is essentially treated the same. Same goes with industrial zone areas. They used to have a slightly different requirement. Now we've removed that option, and they have to comply just like everyone else does. As I said earlier, the triggers for post-construction, this is a little more detailed. So currently the trigger is 20,000 square feet of new built upon area or disturbing more than 1 acre. Single family residential is 24% new BUA or 1 acre or more of disturbance currently. In the proposed, well, actually adopted UDO, it's now 5,000 square feet for both. And one is to meet the needs of stormwater and to try to address some of the issues of infill development. But also, if you kind of do the math here too, single family residential currently is applicable on a lot size of 20,000 square feet. So 24% of 20,000 square feet, it's 5,000 square feet-ish. So technically, they're already required to do it. All right, for submittal process and review requirements, this is a brand new article. It's applying to a lot more things that typically do not go through the development center. The tree ordinance requires a lot of items on, not a lot, but there were changes in the tree ordinance to address some issues and require some tree requirements on single family lots as well. So we've worked with with urban forestry and the rest of the development center in trying to come up with a process to seamlessly review those at the city as one permit. So starting in June, there'll be a separate submittal to the city required, basically for all residential property as well, including review fees. And in that review, stormwater, urban forestry, erosion control, if needed, we'll review concurrently in Excella, and then we will have to issue an approval within the county system. Some examples, we realize this is a big change and there's a new customer base to this. So we have tried to do a lot of outreach to different organizations. So we helped with planning and the presentations leading up to the UDO. We've created handouts for Mecklenburg County to give the building code building standards customers. Our website's kind of under construction at the moment, but we've done numerous presentations to different groups with city and county stormwater, UDO, university, and the county's building development commission. And also we've done the Home Builders Association several times. So. And last, I thought I've given you a lot of bad examples of stormwater things. I would leave you with the one I thought was good. This was a builder who didn't have to do, I don't think, what they did, but they did come in for a review years ago. The pipe did go straight through that where those houses are built, and they rerouted it. There is a significant drainage area to these two inlets, probably 15 or 20 acres. So if those get overwhelmed, they have raised the lots up and they've designed a channel between the two homes to safely convey the water. Any questions?
Thank you, Robbie. Let's see. I see Lansdale, Russell, Wilden, Neely. In that order, please.
Lansdale, quick question. Thanks very much. How great is it to work for Stormwater Services?
How great is it?
Yeah.
It's really great. I mean,
it's awesome, isn't it? I love it. We want to get you guys full staff because you guys do a great job, and we want to make sure you guys get there and do the hard work that has to be done behind the scenes. We only notice you when things go bad, but when things go right, we want to keep it up. That you're doing a great job.
So my land development program just got moved to stormwater 2 or 3 years ago, and I would, at the time, I wouldn't have told you this, but it wasn't 6 months later. It was like, oh, that's probably the best move we could have made. So I appreciate it.
Commissioner Russell, just listening to your presentation, I do have some concerns that we are, in a sense, targeting small development and essentially making an example out of them. And I think that we're going in the wrong direction as we look at trying to mitigate stormwater on a smaller scale and making it harder to develop our smaller scale and do infill. And unfortunately, that's what the city needs. This is a critical mass of development that needs to be done, and it's going to have to be through small scale development. That being said, based on your examples, what things would you recommend or changes would you recommend in your opinion for stormwater for infill development?
Infill development, I think one of the easiest things that infill development could do on an individual single-family house is put in permeable paver driveway. That can solve a lot of problems. So that's one easy thing. There's many different tools in the toolbox that people can try. I mean, Raleigh does a lot of single-family rain gardens in their front yards or backyards, and so they don't have to be huge. That can address some significant issues.
Commissioner Wilden, I have two questions. How has climate change, yes, I'm that person, it affected existing structures in terms of impermeable surfaces and retention pools?
I will say there's currently some ongoing studies by, I think NOAA, the NC State has got one to be released next year to talk about the effects of our rainfall data based on climate change and how we design in the future. Nothing has really changed yet. So we'll see what that data, the results of that data comes out to be. We do see more frequent storms. They're isolated in spots, and yes, they're intense. So it'll be interesting to see what the data comes out and to see how we need to modify our design parameters.
Okay. And then my last question is, how can this body better coordinate with y'all in terms of like heavy rezoning and development areas?
Rezonings are an interesting, I guess, to me, in terms of stormwater. Let's say you have a 2-acre piece of 2-acre parcel, it's wooded. Someone can literally go out there today, cut down about every tree in it and build 2 homes and still not trigger a stormwater ordinance. Somebody that comes in for a rezoning, and that increases a lot of water. Somebody that comes in a rezoning, say they want to put, 16 townhomes, if it's possible, I don't know, on there. They'll trigger the ordinance. And once they trigger the ordinance, we can control the peak runoffs from that site. And it really doesn't matter how much is impervious is on it at that point, we can control it.
Hi, this is Commissioner Neely. Thanks so much for your presentation. It really does help me understand a few things and trigger some thoughts for me as well. One or two questions though. With everything that's going on as far as the density and growth in Charlotte, is there a process? Now, I can imagine you have a huge backlog of people that are making changes, making smaller properties bigger and making bigger properties smaller that are in fact affecting your stormwater growth right now. Is there a process now in place for those people that have those problems coming up that's not backward looking?
Like proactively looking at things that happen?
Looking is a better way of saying it.
Mike are pretty, right now, no.
No, okay.
It's,
okay.
Stormwater, I think, is a little bit different than
yeah.
Sewer. I mean, because stormwater, the capacity of a stormwater system, if it overflows the pipe system, it flows where it naturally wants to go.
Oh, yeah,
so
absolutely.
It's not like we have to treat it
Okay.
in that sense. So.
Okay. Well, one more question too, though. The 24% of new building area, is that big? Is that enough? I mean, seems like it should be smaller than that, just based on what's happened as far as growth and density.
24%.
24%.
That's
that triggers your.
Yeah, so 5,000 to trigger, and then in the central we call it central Catawba. So really the central core of Charlotte is if you go over 24%. Not many people stay under 24%. That's the way it is. If you go out towards the western Catawba, which was the areas mainly shown on that watershed overlay map, that density requirement is 12%.
Okay.
If you go over to the far east, that's draining out towards Rocky River, that's at 10. So there are different requirements depending on where you're at.
Great. Thank you.
So Commissioner Blumenthal, thank you again for the presentation. Coming back to some of the rezoning conversation, one area where, sometimes as a zoning committee, we can be a little bit restricted is that we can really only look at petitions as a standalone thing, right? And not sometimes the cumulative impact that it can have on the immediate surroundings. You may have those same restrictions in the work that you do, but do you have any examples locally of, call it community stormwater collaborations, right? Like multiple developments that share stormwater services to try and increase the efficacy there?
Not really, because try to explain, because I've looked at this as a part of one city council member's area and some different rezonings that are going in there and talking about the cumulative effects and the cumulative effects of stormwater. When you look at rezonings, they're spotty. Well, the majority of the time where those combine are in your major system, which is the major creeks that the county regulates and is regulated by FEMA. Those account for future development. If you're along those creeks, you can't build with it's actually 2 feet above the community-based flood, which is a community-based flood elevation is a 100-year flood of a fully built-out drainage basin. So that's where those converge. It's kind of rare for us to see rezonings in series before it gets to that major system.
And no, that makes sense. And I can kind of see the difficulty. I was just curious if there had been, let's call it a success story, right along those
Not
lines.
that I'm aware of.
And then what is kind of in your opinion, we see a lot of developments now, especially with the infill, where a lot of that stormwater retention is now underground, right? Under the existing development. Does that make things more difficult on your end, or is it just kind of like six one way, half dozen the other?
Those are all privately maintained. It makes it more difficult and more costly for them to maintain, but not us.
Thank you.
I did have a question. I probably should have asked this at Charlotte Water as well.
Name.
Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Seeley. Anyways, so accessory dwelling units are obviously being allowed by the UDO. I think there's actually a statewide effort as well to legalize them in the entire state of North Carolina. But is there anything that definitely doesn't seem like something that would be triggered by a size? I'm looking at building a 500 square foot one in my backyard right now. But how would we trigger it ourselves?
It would technically trigger a drainage review. You probably would not trigger the post-construction stormwater ordinance, but it would probably trigger a review for drainage to safely pass the water so you're not impacting your neighbor, your downstream neighbor, hopefully.
Okay.
And outside of, I'm sorry, yes, Commissioner Shaw.
Hi, Commissioner Shaw. Sorry, one last question. You spent a lot of time on the UDO, which is awesome, and obviously is what we're focused on. I'm curious, I assume that the new development solves some issues for you all and that it's sort of being proactively dealt with when the new developments come up. Can you touch on, even in just a sentence or two, on the existing infrastructure? I'm assuming you guys have upgrade plans and monies that are being spent on capital improvement annually. I've seen it around Charlotte, which is one of the reasons I ask, and just curious if that continues at the same level, kind of how you look at it where new developments aren't necessarily occurring.
It does, but it's basically on complaint driven or issue driven. So, and we have a group that assigns basically a asset and criticality scores to different, where we have issues or different pipes and things to on their likelihood of failure or consequences of flooding, and to help looking at that more going forward.
So outside of some follow-up questions, Robbie, that might come your way, and are you the best person for?
I can get them to who
Okay.
needs to see it.
Thank you so very much. So outside of some follow-up questions, I think we are able to bid you adieu.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much. That's good timing. I think we are right at our last order of business on the agenda. So a couple notes from the chair I'll add. Before we hear from the nominating committee, whoever it is that is nominated, whether it be one or five of you, go ahead and add a midday June 13th meeting here at the Government Center to your calendar. Midday, I think it's 1:30 to 3 or something like that. Somewhere between 1 and 5, 1 and 4. Let's just say that.
Some more clarity coming.
Just so
30 to 2.
12:30 to 2. Okay, I was almost close. Okay, so this past Friday, so notes from the chair, this past Friday, for those of you who don't know or remember, the chair and the vice chair of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Planning Commission also serves as the chair and vice chair of the Planning Coordinating Committee. Planning Coordinating Committee is basically a group of commissioners from other towns, planning boards, planning directors, elected officials, CMS is a piece, school board is a piece, or that's the same thing. There are committee appointments made by Madam Mayor for council, same with Board of County Commissioners, and we all come twice a year, once in the fall, once in the spring to meet. And that meeting of the minds for the spring of 2023, that meeting was this past Friday. Yeah, so instead of us having some ice cold margaritas, we were holed up in a joint luncheon. It was on like, yes, it definitely had some awesome views. My arrival at that meeting, I had to remind a few people of my impending departure from the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Planning Commission. One of the people that I informed was tied to the county. They reminded me of this appointment that Allison and I have to present to the board on June 13th. They strongly encouraged that I handcuff the chair-elect and drag them along with me to this meeting. So I just had to, number one, inform you guys of that meeting on Friday. And number two, yes, the chair-elect will need to accompany us. You probably won't have a speaking part, but they want you there to hear what they have to say. So put that on you guys' calendar, whoever nominees may be. My hopes for incoming officers as Phil and I depart is to continue to encourage each and every commissioner to voice their concern and opinion and not encourage an environment of censorship, to seek and allow for opportunities for commissioners to obtain firsthand knowledge, more context of the challenges our built environment, or at least our contribution to as much as we can impact, right? The built environment challenges that can negatively impact, sometimes detrimentally, either the property or lives of our neighbors, or impact negatively a city department's ability to provide service. I would like to publicly thank Battalion Chief Redden, Blake Redden. He presented to us back in March from Charlotte Fire. Captain Schick and the entire team of Ladder 2 in South End, Inspector Dylan Hauser. They allowed us some of their time also on this past Friday. Friday was busy. Also this past Friday, I contacted many of you to see how many that I can grab along on this tour. We saw some pictures, right, in their presentation in terms of what challenges they face as a result of our the growth that we're experiencing, some of the challenges that they face in terms of design of certain projects. And I wanted to see it firsthand. And I decided to just create this field trip, and Chief Redden kind of let us do that on Friday. Sealy, Winokur, Neely, Gussman, Rhodes, and I promise we were under, and there was no 4 members of either committee present. That was carefully orchestrated. So I attempted to reach many of you, but please understand that I couldn't reach everybody because we had already reached a max on one side or the other. But these are opportunities that we should encourage more. CFD, they were geeked that we were so interested in what their pains were. The 6 of us, right? Because there was not 7.
Definitely not 7, whatever.
The 6 of us were just as equally geeked, more so because we're nerds like that, but just to see firsthand how somebody can lose a life because of on-street parking and non-compliance, or enforcement, or the design of a building adds minutes that can cost them in terms of trying to save somebody's life. That was what I got out of this field trip. So we were able to tour 1, 2, 3, 4 projects. Do I remember that right? 4 projects, and they all were a little bit different in nature in terms of the challenges that they pose to CFD and their ability to provide service. So as I am or have been working to arrange more of these opportunities, starting even before we did the ADM visit, right? Just to see some of these up close and personal ways that we can help impact or massage or eliminate some of the challenges of what we're experiencing here as we try to come up with a comfortable environment for everyone to flourish. So again, incoming chair and vice chair, you are inheriting a great beginning to that work, whoever that nominee might be, those nominees. And my last note before I turn it over to nominating committee is on April 27th. That's handy dandy. It's right here. Actually, well before that, months before that, the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Planning Commission, we had been nominated for a sustainability award. You guys are probably familiar with Sustain Charlotte and the work that they do in terms of advancing and advocating for transportation issues, land development. They were champions of the UDO and comp plan. And every year they award individuals, organizations, nonprofits in their efforts to work through challenges and present solutions for the challenges that we face in terms of impacts to our environment, whether it be by air quality, water quality, transportation. They're a great bicycle advocacy group. And so they recognize and highlight and lift up those individuals who are assisting in doing that work. And the Planning Commission was nominated, and then it became a finalist. And I think my vice chair tried to feel out who might be wanting to attend the ceremony. And kudos to Charlotte Planning, Design and Development Department for also being a nominee. Kudos to Mecklenburg Soil Conservancy, I think that was also nominated. And I think Sustain Charlotte is 2 seconds from being able to confirm that we are only the second advisory board to be announced as a winner. So I'm going to pass this along to let everybody read and relish, and thank you, Sustain Charlotte, for the recognition and for the work that they do. And yes, ma'am.
I was just going to tell everyone on the dais to put it on your resume. Just saying. You won an award.
So they have kind of become that gentle nudge and, hey, Planning Commission, you guys can, you do more. Hey, have you seen this? Have you seen that? And then alternatively, we've leaned on them to gain support for some of our long-range planning efforts like the 2040 plan. They were bodies on the advisory boards and the ambassadors, and they provided feedback and criticisms, but in the end, they were also champions of that document.
And we're partnering with them.
And we are partnering with them on the May 23rd session of Charmac Commission and Community, which is at Eastway Rec at 6 p.m. That, we'll get to the calendar at the last, or actually, Candace, you could put it up now, I think. And with that, last month I announced that the nominating committee was formed, and any person interested in being nominated for chair or vice chair or being elected chair or vice chair should submit information to the nominating committee in writing to express that interest, or have someone submit information on your behalf by the 24th or something like that, 7th, whatever that date was. And the nominating committee has received information. They have met and had discourse, and I will now turn it over to the nominating committee. I think they have identified a spokesperson, but the nominating committee consisted of Commissioners Lansdale, Wilden, and Gaston. And I believe it is Commissioner Gaston who will now speak on behalf of the nominating committee.
Good afternoon, Commissioner Gaston. Just wanted to let everybody know, first of all, thank you for all of your nominations for the vice chair and the chair for the planning commission. It was an interesting task that the three of us had. We weren't quite sure what we were doing, but we figured it out. So thank you, and kudos for answering our questions. Everybody who answered questions for us, Kiva, thank you very much. So we do appreciate that. We do have come up with a slate that we would recommend for the nomination. I'm sorry, a slate that we would recommend for the chair and the vice chair for the planning commission for the next year. And do I give that slate at this point?
Yes.
Okay. And the slate, what we have for the chair, we have Douglas Welton for the chair, and for the vice chair, we have Andrew Blumenthal.
Commissioner Walton has been suggested as our likely nominee for chair of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Planning Commission for fiscal year 2024 by the nominating committee. Commissioner Walton, do you accept said nomination?
Yes.
Commissioner Blumenthal has been identified by nominating committee as the selected nominee for vice chair of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Planning Commission for the fiscal year 2024. Commissioner Blumenthal.
I do.
With the power now. So just to talk through the remainder of this process. So those are the nominees as recommended by the nominating committee. We will now open the floor up for nominations as is allowed in the rules of procedure. And if you have an alternative to chair, if there is another nominee for chair, please raise your hand to make such a motion. I see no hands raised. However, are there any nominations for chair of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Planning Commission? Are there any nominations for chair of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Planning Commission? Yes, I'm required to say that 3 times. Hearing no commentary, seeing no hands raised. Is there a motion to close nominations for chair?
Motion to close Wilden.
Motion by Wilden, second by Blumenthal. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimous. Thank you. There is still an election to happen in June, not today. Are there any nominations for vice chair of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Planning Commission? Are there any nominations for vice chair of the Planning Commission for fiscal year 24? Are there any nominations for vice chair? Fiscal year 2024? Hearing no commentary and seeing no hands raised. Do we have a motion to close nominations for vice chair?
Winokur, motion to close nominations for vice chair.
Seconded by Gusman.
Quick on the draw. Motion by Winokur, second by Gusman. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimous. Nominations are complete. We will have a vote in June. And as a normal process in rules procedure. Thank you for allowing us to go a few minutes over. Who's going to be quick on a draw?
Welton, I move that we adjourn this meeting.
Seconded Wilden.
Motion by Weldon.